Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and welcome to the first ever Living Room Conversations Book Club meeting. My name is Annie Kaplan, and I'm the library's partner for Living Room Conversations. And I am so excited to be joined today by our special guest authors, Leigh, Marz, and Zorn, as they discuss their new book, Golden: The Power of Silence in a World of Noise. And in this book, Justin and Leigh take us on an unlikely journey from the West Wing of the White House to San Quentin's death row, from Ivy League brain research laboratories to underground psychedelic circles, from the temperate rainforests of Olympic National Park to the main stage at a heavy metal festival, all to explore the meaning of silence and the art of finding it in any situation. So Leigh, Justin, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, and I'll let you two take it from here.
Thank you so much, Annie. We thought we would start with the opening words of the book to kind of help set the tone. When we're in person with folks, we love to start there. So it'll just be a couple minutes, but you can hunker in and let the words wash over you. Chapter 1, an invitation. What's the deepest silence you've ever known? You can trust the first memory that comes to you. No need to overthink it. As you remember the experience, see if you can settle into it. Recall where you are, what's happening around you, and who, if anyone, is present. See if you can summon the atmosphere, the quality of light, the mood in the air, the feeling in your body. Is it quiet to the ears? Or is it the kind of silence that comes when no person or thing is laying claim on your attention? Is it quiet in your nerves? Or is it the kind of silence that lives deeper still, like when turbulent waters of internal chatter suddenly part, revealing a clear path forward? Take a moment to consider what might sound like a strange question. Is the silence simply the absence of noise? Or is it also a presence unto itself? So I thought we'd start with a little bit about the inspiration of this book, and maybe Justin, you can get us going there, because I think the inspiration for this book is actually a lot like the inspiration for Living Room Conversations, frankly. I think we share some inspiration. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I feel that too. The inspiration for this book was essentially a question that's probably familiar to many of you, which is just, what are we going to do about this crazy world? How can we possibly be effective in bringing a little bit more love and compassion and sanity right now? We were both working in high pressure work in politics, public policy. I was on Capitol Hill working with the Congressional Progressive Caucus and various members of Congress as a legislative director. And Leigh, as she's been for many years, was working with coalitions and nonprofits and crisis work and environmental work, taking toxic chemicals outside supply chains. And we both just had this feeling of being stuck, like it was impossible to enter into deep conversation with people, like it was hard to find the generative solutions and find the unity around those generative solutions that would move us forward out of the very substantial crises that our communities and country and humanity is facing. And amidst that, Leigh and I both had the same intuition, independently in separate places, through separate experiences, that the first step toward finding an answer, a way forward, was to get beyond the noise, was to tune into silence. And it wasn't exactly a feeling like, oh, we need to go meditate more. We both had long periods of meditation practice, but I think both considered ourselves to be lapsed meditators. But it was a sense that the solutions to the challenges we were facing might not come through more thinking or talking, that the answers might lie in the open space, in the ability to get beyond the noise and tune into intuition. So we acted on that intuition, that hunch. And Leigh, you want to take it from here?
Sure. So we wrote an article for Harvard Business Review looking at silence and really looking at silence more from an auditory perspective. We'll talk more about the definition and framing we use in a second. And to our surprise, that article went viral. This was our second time writing something together. We had not met in person yet, but we took it as an important signal that something was needing our attention. And so we followed those cookie crumbs, speaking with a wide and interesting cast of characters, neuroscientists, politicians, executives, poets, activists, a whirling dervish, a man incarcerated on death row, a Grammy-winning opera singer, and many, many others, all folks who deeply had deep reverence and deep practices of silence. And we asked them that question that we just started with, what's the deepest silence you've ever known? And they gave us this great assortment of answers, some of which we had kind of anticipated, like being in a remote cabin in the woods after soft, like a fallen snow, or looking out on the sunrise over a balmy ocean. But others gave us these interesting answers, like births and deaths and moments of awe, right? Moments where they're running the perfect line around roaring rapids, so it's auditorily quite loud, or at a 4 a.m. dance party, Mark, where the beat is thumping. And so we thought at first maybe they weren't understanding our question or we needed to ask it a little better, but we realized after following their leads that they were pointing us to something really important, that deep internal experience of silence, which may be sort of decoupled from the outside world and the volume and the outside world. And so that's really what this book is about, is exploring their stories, exploring the many, many routes to silence, looking at silence in the external sense, but also in the internal sense, and looking at noise in its many, many variations. You want to walk us through noise, Justin?
Sure. I'd love, and anyone, if
Yeah.
you'd like to stop us, or I know we'll have a chance to go into more group time and discussion time too, but I'd love to hear from any of you. Just first thought, best thought, if anything came up as Leigh asked this question, what's the deepest silence you've ever known?
I'll answer it. I'm reading the book right now. I'm almost at the end. I've been really enjoying it. And as I ask myself that question, I get a different answer. But today, when you read out loud the beginning words of the book, Leigh, what came to me was actually an experience I had that was so similar, Justin, to the one that you talked about when you were holding your twins on your chest. And it was nursing my baby in the middle of the night. And it was, you hear a lot from parents about lack of sleep. And, those of us who are parents, we know it. We've gone through it. We know it. And, nobody really signs up like completely for like lack of sleep. But there was something so peaceful and so powerful about just her and me being awake in that connection, right, of nursing that. And I live in a city, like Toronto's a big city. It's one of the biggest cities on the planet. And, so there's always sirens or, planes, or there's always things going on, but none of it kind of mattered. It was like we were kind of in a magic circle together. So Justin, when you wrote that about holding your twins on your chest, I thought, yeah, that I get it. I know that one.
Thank you so much for saying that, Linda. And that's actually a really good segue into the meaning of noise and the meaning of silence. we talk in the book about these experiences that Leigh and I have both had that have been ostensibly really high decibel or really intense, and finding our deepest silence in these moments, like what Linda was alluding to. I was in the hospital with my wife, and I had twins who were born a little bit early and thankfully healthy, but we were stuck in the newborn intensive care unit for about 3 weeks, right when the lockdowns were starting. And we were just bombarded by noise. And it's a good way to get into the meaning of noise as we see it. It was the literal auditory noise of constant beeping of all sorts of alarm bells that they had all throughout the newborn intensive care unit. And it was also, though, other levels of noise. Like we were constantly checking our phones because there was this new virus that we didn't really know anything about that was causing all these lockdowns. And we didn't know when we'd be able to get out of there. And then there was the internal noise too, the worry, the anxiety, that ruminative thought. So in the book, we explore noise as unwanted interference with our clear perception and also our clear intention. So we look at how auditory noise, the noise in our ears, is on the rise. It's an empirical fact in our world. 65% of the population of Europe lives with noise levels, auditory noise, that the World Health Organization says is hazardous to the health. And there's all sorts of statistics like that we explore to make this really clear case that the auditory noise of the world is on the rise. But it's also the informational noise. Back in 2010, Eric Schmidt, when he was CEO of Google, made this estimate that every 2 days, we create as much information as we did from the dawn of civilization up until 2003. And human beings just can't process exponentially rising amounts of information. We look at a lot of the science of human attention to show that there's a pretty much upward bound of what a human being is able to process in terms of information. So all this additional noise that's coming through our devices and screens, this is wearing away at our attention. Herbert Simon, the Nobel laureate thinker about media and human attention, said that, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. So all this, we find, creates a situation of overwhelming noise internally as well, not just in our ears, not just on our screens, but inside our heads, inside our nervous systems. Ethan Kross, a professor of psychology at the University of Michigan, estimates that we now have to listen to something like 320 State of the Union addresses worth of internal monologue on any given day because of the amount of rumination the average human being does. So it's just overwhelming. So even though human beings have probably always complained about the loudness of life, something right now really is qualitatively different. So we explore then the importance of finding silence and the meaning of silence. Leigh, do you want to say a little bit about the flip side, the meaning of silence?
Sure. We do describe silence as being the absence of noise. That's just as a starting level, and the types of noise that we just described. So on one level, it is absolutely that. It's the absence of unwanted distraction in our ears, on our screens, and in our heads. But we get a little deeper into there, where silence is where nothing is laying claim on our attention, a place where it's not interfering with that perception and intention, as Justin was saying, whereas we really see a link to it being a place of freedom, of our ability to actually guide our where our life's energy goes, gets very deep. So there's a kind of silence that is that absence of noise. But as we spoke with more and more people, and in our own experience and observations, we kept coming back to the silence as a presence unto itself, something described so beautifully in so many different wisdom traditions, and by poets and by the many people we spoke with. Time undisturbed is what Gordon Hempton describes it as, or the think tank of the soul. So we found ourselves less inclined to really bind a definition of silence in this way, silence as presence, and just really invite you and the readers to, pour in your meaning, what silence is for you, what are you present to for for Justin and I, we're really present to relationships, to our interconnectivity, to the natural world, and all beings and things. And for others, and describe it more in a spiritual or a religious connection. And so there's plenty of space for all of that here. But pointing to silence as being something beyond just an absence felt really important to us. And so we do want to invite all that into our discussion today. Yeah. I'm so eager to hear from you all and to have our discussions go that, Annie, I wonder if that you could see if there's any kind of burning questions. We're really just offering the definitions that we came across with noise, that kind of that framework of auditory, informational, and internal. We welcome anything you want to speak to beyond that too, but that's just to give us a common language and framing. And then silence, looking at external silence, but also really focusing in on internal, the subjective experience of silence. And if that's enough, we could kind of dive in.
Yeah, does anyone have anything that they want to bring up, Cecilia?
Yeah, so I'm only beginning in the book, so I didn't get to the psychedelic chapter yet, but until I actually had an experience with ayahuasca, I never knew what internal silence felt like. And I'm wondering if I'll find that out later in the book, if people can actually get to that silent space without the use of psychedelics, because it's so prevalent in our this overthinking everything and being mind cluttered. Is it possible without plants?
I could just start. You want to say something, Justin? Yeah.
Oh, you go
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one thing I'll just say is when we take on in a chapter, what is silence in the mind, a mute button for the mind, is a chapter that looks at neuroscience and also explores some flow states and common states of consciousness known as self-transcendent experiences, STEs, which can describe flow states, moments of awe, and experiences that can be brought about like by activities like mindfulness or meditation, or the use of mind expanding drugs, or any number of things, really, even breastfeeding, as we just learned, with your child. So, but what's beautiful about this is that there's a sense of an umbrella term, a commonality in these things that appear to be very, very different, but maybe bring about a similar experience of a diminishment of activity in the default mode network, a diminishment of a sense of self-referential thought. That's kind of coming from the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow, and combined with a combination or connection with things greater than ourselves. So the self is diminishing and the self is in a way expanding as we connect to, whatever else out there we're connecting to. I mentioned relationships, interconnectivity with the natural world and things like that might be among them, or God or spirit, or any number of things we could say. So I think the answer to your question is absolutely yes. There's many, many multitudes of ways, and for many people, ayahuasca or other mind expanding medicines would definitely not be the way, and we respect that and are definitely not promoting that, but also wanting to broaden all of the considerations and maybe create less of a hierarchy, that one is perhaps better than the other, that really what is important is that we all find our way to silence, however that might be. What would you add, Justin?
Yeah, I think in the culture right now, there's really a feeling that psychedelics can be a kind of panacea, with respect to mental health, with respect to getting beyond the noise of the world right now. And one thing we find is that the psychedelic experience often first amplifies what's going on in our own consciousness. It's often first about sometimes a lot more noise. So it's often a kind of amplification of the work of discerning the signal from the noise, which is a big part of what we're studying in the book. So in these states of expanded consciousness, like Leigh's talking about, there's an opportunity sometimes to tune into a really radiant kind of silence, this kind of canvas of creation, as we discuss it in the book. but it's not accessible for everyone. It's not an automatic thing. So it's our hope that as these psychedelic medicines become more available, it makes people more aware of the noise that's present in the consciousness, and also more aware of the possibilities of silence. So we look at the example of Houston Smith, the legendary scholar of world religions, who talks about psychedelic experience as finding a way not to altered states, but to altered traits. And this is kind of a theme we look at in various different angles in the book, that these silences, even these forms of these places that take us beyond the noise of our lives, how do we find the opportunity to change not just our states, to be temporarily in quiet, but really find these kinds of silence that can transform?
So can I add something? I had a teacher who lived in San Francisco, and he had been a professor at San Francisco State and dropped out after he took LSD. And so he would teach to all this young people that showed up out there and didn't know what the heck was going on, but we were dropping lots of drugs. And he said one night that at his class that he said, LSD is the antidote to the Industrial Revolution. And it really struck me because we used to live out in the nature and we go catch a rabbit for supper, and yeah, we were all kind of in tune. And then we all got forced into cities because the land was all taken away and we had to work in factories and noise, and we just lost touch with that silence within us. And I did have one experience on LSD where I got in. They used to talk about the white light. I thought, what's that? And then one day I was sitting in white light. Everything was white. I couldn't see any color. It was just white. And that was probably the most silent place I'd been, where there was nothing except white. I just in a sea of white. And I think maybe that's what, people try to talk about getting enlightened, where you're not distracted by anything. And the other thing I remember from those days was reading about a Zen master who moved to New York City. And somebody asked him, why would you move to New York City? You're a Zen master. And he said something to the effect that, well, if I can't be enlightened in New York City, I can't be enlightened anywhere. And so the noise and the hubbub of New York City was really his test, to see if he could really exist in his own space, in spite of any noise and confusion.
I love what you said, Thomas, about the antidote to the Industrial Revolution. A big part of this book that we explore is how the way, really since the Industrial Revolution, but especially since World War II, the way we've measured progress as a society is through GDP, is through industrial production. And now in the age of the attention economy, in the age of the information economy generally, the way we measure progress is through the production of industrial stuff, and also through the production of data, of sound and stimulus and advertising revenue. And the way GDP is measured, if you keep a pristine forest intact, it doesn't produce any value according to our measure of economic progress. And you can say the same thing about human attention. If human attention is intact, enjoying nature, enjoying quiet time with our children, enjoying quiet time, making beautiful music or enjoying beautiful art, it doesn't produce any value according to GDP, and yet that's where we find the most thriving. So we look in this book about what it would mean, first, for us to appreciate silence, the value of the empty spaces, the value of the simplicity that you're talking about, Thomas. And as a society, what would it mean for us to, again, appreciate silence? And how might we change our economic indicators so that we not only measure the value of nature and thinking about economic progress to change GDP to do that, but to also measure the value of silent attention? We propose a few technical ideas for how to do that toward the end of the book, but the main thing we really want to do is present this idea of the importance of appreciating the silence.
I'll only add that we're interested in that as individuals. We're interested in that as family members and friends, and as co-workers and colleagues and co-conspirators and all types of work. And then as a society, large, and what can our government do to support sanctuary spaces for quiet and different things like that, as well as how can we really celebrate silence as a culture and through arts and through shared ritual and just appreciation. So that'd be our framing. Thank you. Getting us rolling.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share at this point, or any clarification questions?
I'd like to just share, because what happened for me was I was on a 4-day fasting vision quest in nature. And not only did I experience quiet, but I got to the point where I was not having thoughts anymore. It was like I had ruminated and I had, passed by everything that was sort of waiting for attention. And I was surprised. I had not expected that. But I think it was a combination of just drinking a gallon of water a day and being alone in nature. It was quite unique and memorable, let's say. Yeah.
Jane, after how long was that the thoughts kind of disappeared or subsided?
I can't tell you at what point,
Yeah.
but all of a sudden I realized that, yeah, there was nothing there waiting, popping in, her, yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Amazing. Yeah.
We look in the book at there's a story in chapter 2 of some of you may have already read this part, but we look at the story of a man named Cyrus Habib, who came here, the son of Iranian immigrants to the US, and he went blind when he was 8 years old, and he learned Braille and went to Columbia and became a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, went to Yale Law School and became the lieutenant governor of Washington State when he was very young, in his 30s. And when everyone was waiting for him to tell them what his next move, what his next campaign would be in politics, he announced that he was taking a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience as a novice Jesuit priest. And we talked with Cyrus right before he makes the jump, and right when he's still in the lieutenant governor's office, and then a little while after. And he told us about how he left in November of 2020, left the lieutenant governor's office and went on a 1-month silent retreat where he studied some of the preliminary prayers and practices of being a Jesuit priest. And he couldn't even find out who had won the presidential election. Here he was, a politician, couldn't even read any news. And he said that when he got there, it was like he was on this total elimination diet with respect to auditory noise and informational noise. And yet he was dealing with these hearty, heaping servings of internal noise. It was louder in his consciousness than it had ever been. Even after a while, it sounds like, Jane, he had a different experience than you. And he said that he realized, though, and this may speak to Jane why it was different, he realized he was in this mode that he had been in for decades, really, of judging his sense of self-worth based on what other people thought of him, to the point that he was living in a mode of constantly performing to other people's expectations, which meant that even if he was thinking about how to solve a problem in public policy, he was really thinking about it in terms of how it would look on Twitter and on a press release. He found that kind of proclivity to perform, that kind of mode of being, was this point source of the internal noise in his consciousness. And once he realized where he really wanted to be was right where he was, things started to shift for him. So this book is a lot about how to explore the dynamics of the auditory noise and informational noise and how they interact with the internal noise. That's really what we explore with a lot of these figures in the book.
Well, Leigh, Justin, thank you so much for starting us off with that and giving us so much context around all of these topics. And in the spirit of all of this, I wanted to take a couple minutes for a brief meditation, just so that we can reconnect to silence and presence before we move into our group discussion. So I invite everyone to find a posture that will most support you in being relaxed, at ease, and awake. And just take some moments as you settle in to feel that you can let go. And let go of anything that wants to be more at ease in your body and mind. You can soften your gaze or close your eyes if that's comfortable. And just take some moments to ground yourself, feeling the weight of gravity, the experience of your body on this earth. And becoming aware of the movement of your breath. You might extend the breath, taking a nice long in-breath and a long out-breath. Again, breathing in, filling the chest and lungs, and breathing out, releasing, relaxing outward. And again, inhaling deeply with a slow, smooth out breath. With this breath, breathing deep down into your belly and releasing with a long exhale as you soften down the length of your body. Letting go. No need to do anything. Just resting in this natural presence. In the foreground, you may notice the dance of sensations, thoughts, emotions, rising up and falling away. But I invite you to turn your awareness to the background, finding a wakeful, receptive presence. The silence that is listening to it all. And when we let go of doing and return back into this stillness, we sense our true nature. And I just want to close with a quote from the book. The divine radio is always singing. If we could only make ourselves ready to listen to it, Gandhi wrote. But it is impossible to listen without silence. So as we gently come back, feel your feet on the ground. You can let your breath return to its natural rhythm. And just really open to the feeling and the sense of silence and presence that's right here. Thank you all. Okay. So I know we have been in a little bit of a discussion already, but I would love to take a few minutes for us all to go around and just introduce ourselves and say our names. And I can just start us off. And if we can just pick the next person, just so we can kind of keep the flow moving of who to go next. So my name is Annie Kaplan, and I will hand it off to Jane.
My name is Jane Calbreath.
I can jump in. I'm Leigh Marz, and I'll hand it off to Joan.
I'm Joan Blades, and I'll hand it off to Justin.
I'm Justin Talbot Zorn. I'll hand it off to Linda.
Hi, everybody. I'm Linda. My actually crazy first name is actually Linda Ruth. It's one of those double-barreled names. So my name is Linda Ruth Siglin. And next person on the screen to me, and I'll hand it off to Thomas.
I am Thomas Orgula. I'll hand it off to the other Linda on the call.
Hi, I'm Linda Jones, and I'm in California, and this has been really enjoyable. I like this. Oh, who else hasn't gone? Larry?
You're on mute, Larry.
Unmute, honey.
There we go. There we are. I am Larry Eichner, and I am sitting in my backyard in Independence, Missouri.
Home of Harry Truman.
Yes, that is true. A great house to go through. Very humble.
I'll just go Sushila Mertens. And Margie.
Hi, I'm Margie Belyak. I'm in Pittsburgh, I think that Pennsylvania. I like knowing where you're from. Yes, thank you. This was a great meditation. Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much. And it's great to be together this evening. And we just released a new conversation guide inspired by Golden called Silence and Noise, Finding Stillness in the Modern World. And we're going to be using questions from that guide in this discussion. And if any of you are new to a living room conversation, we start out with a set of conversation agreements to set the tone of the conversation and just create a container that fosters meaningful and respectful dialogue. So I will go ahead and share my screen and I'll read the first agreement, and then we can go around calling on the next person like we did before to read out the following agreement until we go through them. So let me just do this real quick. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so the first conversation agreement is be curious and listen to understand. Conversation is as much about listening as it is about talking. You might enjoy exploring how others' experiences have shaped their values and perspectives. And Linda Jones, do you feel like reading the next one? No? What about Thomas?
Sure.
Thank
Show
you.
respect and suspend judgment. People tend to judge one another. Setting judgment aside opens you up to learning from others and makes them feel respected and appreciated. Try to truly listen without interruption or crosstalk. And let's go to Shushila.
Note any common ground as well as any differences. Look for areas of agreement or shared values that may arise, and take an interest in the differing beliefs and opinions of others. How about Jane?
Now I lost my place. Is it be authentic? Is that the one?
Yes.
Yeah. Be authentic and welcome that from others. Share what's important to you. Speak from your experience. Be considerate of others who are doing the same. And I will pass it to Joan.
Okay. Be purposeful and to the point. Do your best to keep comments concise and relevant to the question you are answering. Be conscious of sharing airtime with other participants. And I'm going to choose Larry because inside knowledge, he's my cousin. And he saw this on Facebook. So I want to introduce you to my cousin, Larry.
Yes, we've known each other for a while, but our parents longer. Own and guide the conversation. Take responsibility for the quality of your participation and the conversation as a whole. Be proactive in getting yourself and others back on track if needed. Use an agreed upon signal, like the timeout sign, if you feel the agreements are not being honored.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks everyone for reading those. Okay, so I will go ahead and it looks like Joan, you already put the conversation questions in the chat. Thank you. So I will go ahead and put you all in breakout groups so that we can discuss these with each other. And feel free to, either answer one of these questions from the conversation guide, or if you were able to read the book, you can also talk about anything regarding that. Was that enough time? Did I cut people off?
No, it's good.
Okay, great.
I thought it would be way too long, but our group was exceptional. Because most breakout times I've done through other groups, it was like, you got 4 to 5 minutes and it shut down. When you said a half an hour, I said, what the heck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that once we get going, we can go pretty deep. Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. I hope that, allowed you to go a little further into all of this with each other. And now with the last 13 minutes or so, we'll now have a bit of time for Q&A. So if anyone wants to get us started, feel free to go ahead.
I have a question. So how does silence relate to intelligence? If you know what I'm asking.
Yeah, say a little more if you don't mind.
Well, sometimes people are smarter at one time in the day than the other. And I'm curious, like I can't study or write a paper unless I have some music on. You know what I mean? I can't concentrate without having some music. I don't know. I think that occupies a part of my brain that maybe where the noise exists. And so, I don't know. I'm just kind of wondering what gives us the ability to see clearly. Some people, like if I'm turning a bowl on my lathe, I can actually think some interesting thoughts and still pay attention, right? Because part of my attention is all here, and I still can have some other things going on. And I'm always wondering where the sweet spot is. Am I smarter if I've just watched the news and I'm thinking about the world's problems, or am I smarter if I'm, out picking weeds in the garden? I don't know. I'm just curious.
Yeah, we got to know a neuroscientist psychologist duo Adam Ghazali and Larry Rosen a little bit and interviewed them in the book. And they talk about two different kinds of attention, top-down attention and bottom-up attention. And top-down attention is like when you're making a piece of pottery, you're picking weeds or writing a novel or, following your doctor's recommendation for something. It's what you intend to do and paying attention to it. Bottom-up attention is like the stimuli that we react to, like a news alert coming from the phone or a falling tree branch or a honking car or someone calling our name. And, both types of attention are really important. The bottom up is arguably, as important, if not more, for our survival. But the bottom up attention, when there's more stimulus on the bottom up attention, and the bottom up attention can sometimes be reacting to things that come up in our own minds, worries that pop up in our own minds seemingly out of nowhere that aren't really a product of our real reasoning and intention. A lot of what we're exploring in this book is that the bottom up stimuli, the bottom up distractions are increasing. So, it's always hard to say, are we smarter one time or another? But there's a lot of empirical research that we're better, to the way you framed it. We can think more clearly when there's less bottom up interference. We can think more clearly when we have the space to pursue what's important for us. What would you say, Leigh?
I love where you're taking us. I think one of the things we hope for in this book is to really tune into when are we in that optimal place of attention and focus that we're seeking, and where we do feel like maybe the answers may come, or that idea, or even what to do with that bowl or something else in life, when it just comes swooping in. So we could take notice, as opposed to just kind of go to a default. What maybe used to work may not work anymore, or if we really tune into what's happening in our bodies or in our minds and our relationships, might we notice that there's a little bit of a signal there telling us we're actually overwhelmed by the amount of stimulus coming at us, or maybe we want to add some stimulus so that we can focus further, which our group was talking a lot about, really just having a diversity of experiences around, in a sense, multitasking, or using multiple channels, whether it's something kinesthetic in addition to something you're thinking about. And so this book is not about saying this is the one and only way, and it's, at all, as I hope you got from our time together, but really starting to discern for each of ourselves what are the signals that tell us we are finding the quiet we need. What are the signals that tell us we might be saturated by noise in our lives and need to pull back a little bit? And then to also invite in spaces for us to really tune into silence, and then to reap the benefits of that in terms of the clarity it offers, the insight it might offer, and the healing and connection to the things we care about most. I see Margie talking. I saw you talking, but I think you're on mute.
Thank you. One of my bedside books for years has been Stuart Wilde's The Power of Silence. Have you read that by chance? I mean, he is so, or was so addicted to silence, and it went beyond meditation. His idea of being with a group and being silent is just elevating everybody else in the group, that you're not trying to be the one that, and you learn so much more if you just shut up.
We're very interested in that place where we're just there we love the humility that comes with silence. Yeah. And the deeper wisdom that we can gain access to. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we explore this idea that silence is humility, that it's a stance of being able to let go. And we also think a lot about how to bring this into practice, particularly with organizations. I mean, certainly with individuals, and talked about some of that. But for example, in group brainstorming meetings, there's often this tyranny of the fastest and loudest. So is it possible to orchestrate or organize a brainstorm meeting as a group, thinking about how to generate creative solutions that's really focused on bringing forth the silence in such a way that it invites people to participate, or it invites new and unusual ideas to emerge. So building periods of silence into the brainstorming, or having non. There's all different ways to bring this up.
Well, I think if we could get people to read the book and keep talking about silence and this and what you just expressed, that it could like culturally be a game changer. And until people think that the loudest is the most powerful, you know, we have to, it's really a dynamic to change everything that isn't working right now.
That's our hope. Thank you for saying.
Yeah.
That was our hope.
Very, very important book.
Thank you so much for that.
This isn't really a question, but your book made me laugh out loud when you started talking about Richard Nixon, and I had forgotten that he was a Quaker, right? And you had already set up the way the Quakers use silence in their meetings, and I had completely forgotten that he was a Quaker. And of course, you talked about the ways that he wasn't a very good Quaker that we're all really familiar with. But I'm in Canada, but somehow I missed that part of his legacy was the Noise Control Act. Like, I don't know, maybe the rest of you were a bit more tuned into that. And then President Reagan then later dismantled it. But I thought, wow, that, you know, not that it completely redeems Richard Nixon in my eyes, but I thought, well, you know, that was a cool thing that he did, you know, and maybe that training as a Quaker from his early days and the importance of silence kind of moved him to that.
Yeah,
go ahead, Justin. Yeah,
it's a funny thing. We actually are just working on an article about that. But he, you know, it was kind of in a day when there was a little bit more bipartisan openness to environmental goods, and you know, he also launched the EPA here. Yeah, but not many people know about the noise control work.
we're just approaching the 50-year anniversary of that actually in October. So that's one reason why we're writing a piece to reflect upon that, because we don't have that kind of protection around noise. And what we would want to include would be attention. The attention economy.
Where will your piece appear?
We're not sure yet. We're still working on it. Yeah.
We can let you know.
Yeah.
We'll share with Annie. Yeah, we'll let you know.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
But you know, it's also can be a culturally sensitive thing to just say that it's just about the auditory noise. There was a piece in the Atlantic that came out recently that was called "Why Rich People Love Silence," that was all about the tendency to try to suppress noise in gentrifying neighborhoods in Brooklyn. And really what we're talking about isn't so much that kind of noise, like the noise of an apartment building even say. What we're talking about is the broader societal structuring to see the maximum production of mental stuff as progress, industrial noise, you know, a culture that's all about creating as much sound and stimulus as possible. I mean, Leigh mentioned, I think, that she's a choreographer teaches dance classes, and you know, we love the sound and stimulus of loud music and having fun. But there's a kind of cultural orientation that we as an economy, as a society, have adopted around as much sound and stimulus as possible. You know, and the other piece of this too is just that, you know, sometimes people think about silence as apathy or withdrawal. And one thing we write about in the book is, you know, whether it's in a workplace or community more broadly, this isn't about squelching anyone's voice. It's just about the place of being able to find discernment in silence as we, get away from what we were talking about in our small group, about that kind of jump right in, needing to perform, needing to look good on Twitter and the press release and so on, approach to things, back to Gandhi. And Annie, you mentioned that wonderful quote about how the work of silence is this work of discerning what's true.
Well, I feel like we need that more than ever these days. So this book is totally what our culture needs and what we as individuals need, I believe. And I just love how you took such a holistic approach and, talked to so many different people from vastly different walks of life, that I feel like, at least someone's story could resonate with some reader somewhere. So I just thought the way you presented and wove together everything was so beautifully, skillfully done. I just can't thank you both enough for putting this out into the world and for taking the time to talk to us about it today.
Annie, did you
Having
want to
us.
get permission for the picture, or did you take the picture already, or do you want to get
I have
permission?
not taken a photo yet. Yeah, is everyone
We lost
okay?
Larry
Take a group picture?
before they leave.
Good call, Sushila. Okay. All right, it is done.
Yay, it's happened.
Screenshot.
Thank you all so
Thank
much for really
you.
honoring us in this topic with your presence tonight. We so appreciate it. It's been
We
awesome.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leigh.
Thank you.
Justin. This was incredible.
Thank you so much. This is
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you, Annie.
And
Yeah,
Great.
thank you, Anne.
Yes.
for organizing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you.
Time. This was
Take
an
good care.
Great.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.